Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the top 10 teams and just what exactly do we need to see from them. I think for A&M, the biggest thing that I want to see is just keep up what you've been doing. Do what you did last week, be able to handle your business, not go into that game even a little bit worried, handle your business, continue on your way. But definitely one that I'm a little bit nervous about for the Aggies. But let's get into a little bit of a whip around here because we got a ton of games that are going to be going on this weekend, a ton that are a little bit more under the radar because of all the big marquee games, or at least that one big marquee game that is going to go on this weekend. So definitely a lot that I want to get to. And that Ole Miss Arkansas game, we talked about it on the upset alert, and it's very, very interesting. It's one of those games where Ole Miss has every ability to win this game and relatively win it pretty comfortably. I think they have the players on the outside. I think they have the guys. Now, if Trey Harris doesn't go, then you might have an issue on your hands. But definitely something to watch here. I think they're one of those teams where the offense has been able to score pretty much every single first drive, and then they just kind of go stagnant. This is an Arkansas defense that can cause problems for you if you go stagnant, and the offense will take full advantage. Taylon Green is a very, very talented player, and him against this D-line is going to be very, very interesting to watch. But at the end of the day, I think there's an Arkansas team that is looking for another big win. They would get to them to 6-3 if they were able to win this game and put them in really good position to go 8-4 this season, and then Texas comes into Fayetteville, so you might not even lose that game. Maybe you go 9-3 and have a really remarkable season if you're Arkansas, but at the end of the day, it comes down to Taylon Green. He's going to have to be special in this game the same way he's been special a lot this year. I think he has the ability to make those special plays they need, and frankly, I think Iowa State's going to... Iowa State. I think Arkansas is going to be able to win this game. I do think Ole Miss goes down in this one. I think there's a little bit of a look ahead to that Georgia game because they know how important it is. I think Arkansas takes care of them before that Georgia game and knocks him out of the CFP race. Then you got Air Force Army, a huge game for the Black Knights over there, and definitely a game where you're on your road to a Notre Dame game, possible undefeated season. You got to take care of the first leg of the Commanders-in-Chief Trophy. You got to make sure that you handle that business, move on, and then you're playing a team that you should be able to handle business against. This Air Force team is 1-6. They give up 329 yards on the ground to Navy. You should be able to beat this team up. And frankly, with Bryson Daly, he should be able to put up just ridiculous numbers in this game. Now, it is a rivalry game, always has a little bit more to it than you see on paper, but at the end of the day, I think Army takes care of business. I think they absolutely beat up this team, and I think that Navy game, they won 34-7 over Air Force. I think that looks relatively nice at the end of this one. I think Army just goes to work, frankly. And then you got Virginia Tech Syracuse, a huge game over there in the ACC. The one of the few teams that still mathematically has an ability to get to the CFP is Virginia Tech. Now, you got to win this one, and then you got to invite Clemson into Blacksburg. So you got plenty of work to do, but let's get through this week and then see where we are. I think the funny thing about this game is going to be the battle of styles. You have Kyle McCord in this passing offense for Syracuse. They are going to push the ball downfield. For Virginia Tech, it's Byshal Tuden, it's Kyron Drones, it's running the football, keeping the ball on the ground, and trying to find a way to get those couple of plays on the defensive side to get you a couple extra possessions. I think this is going to be a really fun battle. I think it's going to go back and forth. Syracuse has taken a lot of hits over the last couple of weeks, and frankly, I think it's probably too much. I really like this Syracuse team, but I think Virginia Tech gets the win. I think they set up a really fun game against Clemson this next weekend. Then you got Minnesota at Illinois, and this is a very interesting game because Minnesota's favored. Illinois is a two-loss team that's only lost at Penn State and at Oregon, and somehow they're 3-point underdogs at home to Minnesota. But here we are. It could be that BYU-UCF line again, and I'm going to try not to fall for it, but I might just. I think Max Brosmer is coming off the best game of his year against Maryland, where he went up for over 300 yards, 4 scores on the week, played really, really good football. Thing is, this Illinois backend is an absolute problem. They are really, really good against the pass. Have only gotten exposed really against Oregon this year, and definitely is going to be very interesting to watch that battle go back and forth and see if Darius Taylor gets a little bit more involved in this offense than he was a week ago for Minnesota. So I think it's a really interesting game. I think Illinois is a very, very talented team. I think they're a lot more solid than they're probably getting credit for. I think they win this one. I think they make that Vegas line look just a little bit dumb with a win over Minnesota here. And then you got Vanderbilt. Auburn fans, the bad man is back. I hate to tell you, but Diego Pavia is coming back to the Plains, and he is not coming for a loss. Last year he came in, went 201 passing, 3 touchdowns en route to a 31-10 win for New Mexico State over Auburn. It was one of the craziest games of last year. It was one of those games that remotely understand even to this day. But at the end of the day, that quarterback's coming back into the fray. He's coming back to the Plains, and he is looking for another win. He's an underdog, again, to this team, and it'll be really, really interesting to watch this one unfold. Vanderbilt, coming off a tough loss to Texas. Auburn coming off a solid win to Kentucky. It's going to be a running battle. It's going to come down to who can win that. It's going to be fascinating to watch this one. I think this is a little bit of a fight. I think they run the ball. I think it's going to be a little bit low scoring. I think they really get after each other. I'm not betting against Diego Pavia. I'm not picking against him right now. I think they stay alive. I think they get bowl eligible, I believe, in this game and continue moving forward towards a very, very good season for Vanderbilt. So I understand Auburn's favored. I think that's another line that's a little bit off this week. Then we got Kansas State Houston. We talked about this one in the upset alert segment yesterday, and I think it's a really fascinating one to watch because you got a Kansas State team that is starting to roll towards that Big 12 title. They're starting to play that football that we've expected them for them from a long time, and we talked about it with Iowa State. Same exact scenario with Kansas State. Go into that game as a 10-1 team, had every ability to win that one, go to the Big 12 title, and then go on to the CFP. That's the only real way you're going to be able to do this. And then for Houston, it's kind of just about pulling a rabbit out of a hat. It's not necessarily a game where you match up great. It's not necessarily a game where you're in a great position to win it. Now, you do have a quarterback in Donovan Smith, or in Zion Chris, got confused with those quarterbacks over at Houston. But if you do have a quarterback in Zion Chris that, if he can make a couple of plays with his legs, is going to be a problem, is absolutely someone that could create a little bit of an issue. And this Kansas State team, maybe if you push them just a little bit, they'll start to crack. Who knows what happens with this team when they get a little bit of adversity thrown in front of them. But I think it's going to be a really fun matchup between two really dynamic quarterbacks in Chris and as well as Avery Johnson. In reality, Houston's not winning this game. Unless Kansas State just outright hands it to them, I don't think Houston has the ability to win this game. So all due respect to the Cougars, I do think Kansas State gets this one done. I think they continue moving forward to that Big 12 title that is going to be a huge one to watch. It's definitely one of those games where that Iowa State-Kansas State game could be one of the most consequential games when it comes down to the CFP, down the stretch of this season. Definitely going to be huge, and Kansas State's just trying to get there unscathed, at least the rest of the way. Then you got USC-Washington. This is a game that I talked about a little bit yesterday, but both these teams are just outright desperate for a win. Both are 4-4 right now. They're watching the team they probably hate the most in that conference in Oregon roll their way to a Big Ten title and possible national title. They're looking for a way to just feel good about where they are. They're looking for to be that second team in the Big Ten that came on over from the Pac-12. So USC's defense has taken a ton of hits, and they have struggled in the past couple of weeks. They played a little bit better football against that Rutgers team, but Rutgers is a little bit easier to stop on offense than Washington is. So we'll see what happens here. I tend to believe we're going to get a little bit of a shootout in this game. I think they're going to get after each other just a little bit. I don't think it's necessarily one of those games where you have one team that just totally dominates one way or the other. I also don't think it's a game where you have 20 points on one side. I think it's going to be a little bit up and down, a little bit kind of attacking downfield. And you got two quarterbacks that are kind of on different parts of their career, where you have Miller Moss trying to get his way in college football, trying to become one of those stars. Will Rogers, deep into his career, very, very confident in what he can do, and definitely in a place where he feels very good about where he is in Washington and possibly even going forward. And could this be a statement game possibly in the NFL draft? Obviously something that I'm not necessarily betting on, but if he goes out there and performs the next couple of weeks, then maybe some people start calling. But overall, I think this is one of those things that comes down to stuff off the field. I think these are two teams that are relatively evenly matched. I don't necessarily think there's a huge edge one way or the other. I'm going to go with Washington because they have the atmosphere in their favor. They have the veteran quarterback. I think USC is in a really weird spot, and I don't necessarily think it's going to equate into wins. So I think they put USC in a little bit of dire straits here, and Washington gets a win that they very badly need right about now. And then the game that we talked about just a second ago with Tennessee, now let's get into the other side just a little bit because this Kentucky team is just looking for a win. They're looking for that moment this season because they got it against Ole Miss earlier in the year. This would be another chance against a team that is going to play better defense than Ole Miss, but at the end of the day, does have the ability where if you stop this run game, if you're able to slow down Dylan Sampson, which is a tall order, but if you're able to do that, there's a world where this Tennessee offense just goes totally flat. You have an ability to possibly just shut this entire thing down, and it'll be interesting to see just how Josh Heupel approaches this game in the first place, because the reality is the pass game has not necessarily been there, especially downfield. Does he just say we're going to run the ball, play defense, and get out with a win? Because they likely could in this game if they wanted to follow that formula. Thing is, you're going to need those big plays down the stretch. So in this game, is he going to let it fly? Is he going to try to get that going? Or is it going to be a little bit more ground and pound, just get out with a win and move on to a big-time game with Georgia in a couple of weeks? They do have Mississippi State before, but let's be totally honest, that's probably a win. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a really interesting game where Kentucky's a tough team. They're one that can absolutely push a team like Tennessee to the brink and possibly cause some problems for them. Thing is, I just think there's going to be too many big plays. I do think Nico has kind of turned a corner after that big play against Alabama. I think he's going to hit at least a couple in this game, and I think Tennessee probably pulls away, probably wins by 14 points in this one. I don't necessarily love this Kentucky team, but I do think they have a defense to keep it close for a half, 3/4 maybe, and then Tennessee makes the plays down the stretch of this game. So it's going to be interesting to watch this week unfold. It's one of those weeks where you have that marquee matchup in Happy Valley, and then you got a ton of other games. You know, you have Pitt, SMU, you have a couple others that are going to be big time. They're not necessarily like a myriad of big time games all over the place. So it's going to be one of those weeks where a lot of stuff could go wrong for a lot of teams. It's just one of those things that happens in college football, and definitely will be something that I'm watching very, very closely this upcoming weekend. But we'll be back tomorrow. We'll break down all of the hypotheticals like we were talking about earlier, Anthony. We'll break down pretty much everything else that you need to know around this upcoming week in college football. But thank you once again for tuning into the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have great people doing great work across every single sport you could possibly want. So definitely come and tune into GSMC. We have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I'll be back tomorrow to tie us from loose ends for this week 10.